All right, I have hit go live, and now this is the little part where I anxiously check everything to see if we're actually live or not. And today we have the added benefit of I've never used this streaming software before, so I really don't know if we're going to go live or not. It looks like, woohoo, the stream I had set up and sent a link out to everybody for on YouTube did connect to this StreamYard stream, so I think we're all good there. That's fantastic news. I will ask everybody in the chat. We got a bunch of people, already 41 people waiting. So hello and good morning to everybody. If you would, let us know if you can hear us okay. And I'll give Brian a second to speak here in a second. It says you can see us both. We should be going live here to YouTube as well as inside the Facebook group, inside the admin bar community. Hopefully that's working as well. I'm going to double check that just while we're sitting here and waiting for people to come on the stream. It is working. Holy crap. StreamYard is a whole lot easier than OBS. So that's good news. All right. So last thing I have to do here is just see if comments are coming in. It doesn't look like all of them are coming in through StreamYard. So I'll have to keep an eye out here in YouTube land. All right, fantastic. Good to see everybody here today. We'll get started. I'll shut up. We got tons of stuff to cover here. Hopefully all of you are already familiar with Perfmatters and with Brian, but I like to start every one of these streams off by just giving our guests a second to tell us a little bit about themselves and what it is they do, and then we'll jump into this, Brian.
My name is Brian Jackson, and I'm the co-founder of Forge Media along with my brother. And right now we're focused on developing two plugins. So we do the Perfmatters plugin, and then we have our NovaShare plugin, and both are basically hyper-focused around performance and core web vitals and page speed insights, and just anything we can do to make sites run faster. That's what we're focused on. So.
Fantastic. All right, and today this is kind of going to be a continuation on the two live streams we've done prior. I don't think you have to have seen all those for any of this to make sense, but it would definitely be helpful if you've watched those before. This is going to be kind of like everything that's been added to or changed inside Perfmatters since the last time we did a live stream together. Me and Brian got together and went through all this the other day, and we decided we're going to do a couple more live streams scheduled. We're planning on doing some kind of AMA, maybe not as a live stream, but as like a recorded video. So I'm going to be soliciting a bunch of performance questions, Perfmatters related and not Perfmatters related, that Brian can answer. And then I think at the beginning of the year, we want to do another like full tutorial on Perfmatters start to end, and try to make it a little bit more concise so people don't have to spend 6 hours going through 3 different live streams to gather all of the information. Would probably be helpful. All right, fantastic. Brian, I'm going to set here where we're going to see your screen, and I'm just going to let you take over. I'm going to be monitoring the chat on both Facebook and YouTube and interrupt you with questions people have and interrupt you with my own. So hopefully that's okay, and I'll just let you take it away here.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so let me go into, I have a test site here that I'm running. Go into here, and as you mentioned too, I think it is good to go back and watch the other videos if you're wanting like that full speed through test and everything. And yeah, I think we'll do another one like that too. I think it's going to be really helpful. Let's go here. And we'll go to Perfmatters. So one of the big things we changed since the last time we spoke was the UI. And if you see me glancing over to the right, I have another monitor here with some notes that I'm looking at occasionally. We changed, before we had a horizontal menu, which a lot of people were getting lost for some reason. We had actually many tickets of people just asking where the licensing was, where the tools were. So we've changed everything to the vertical navigation now. And we haven't had a ticket since about the UI. So I think we made the right decision when we moved it here. And we changed everything to like pills instead of these boxes. Actually, we actually had a lot of tickets of people wanting us to use pills for some reason. So I don't know what it is about pills for toggles, but people seem to like that. And once we started playing with it, we actually kind of liked it ourselves too. So we moved everything to the kind of rounded corners. And then we've updated the icons, buttons. I'll just click through here, a couple screens here. So everything is just one menu, vertical, nowhere to get lost anymore.
Yeah, it looks great. It's a nice improvement for sure.
And yeah, just trying to keep it simple because we feel like the plugin itself is already complicated, I would say. I mean, optimization is just tricky unless you know what you're doing sometimes. And so keeping the UI simple is at least one thing we can do. And we did actually, let me turn some things on here just so you can see it here. We made some changes to the admin bar here. So now we have like clear use CSS up here. And we have you can actually click Perfmatters now to go back to the settings. Before you had to kind of bounce back and forth. And I actually forgot to turn on the script manager here too. I'll do that. So yeah, you have these. You can get to the settings, script manager, and clear use CSS across the whole site if you need to, or this current page actually is what you're going to do. So that's easily more accessible.
And you said you're actually able to turn that off too if you need to.
Yeah, and that's what I'll show here next. Let's see. We'll go to tools, and we have hide admin bar menu. We had a lot of people. I think it's more people working with clients and stuff. We actually have quite a few that have their clients as admins on the site. So we don't really want to mess with permissions too much. We prefer you like use a different plugin if you want to like fine tune granular permissions and stuff. So, and by that I mean a different permissions plugin. There's a lot of role plugins out there. So yeah, you can change the hide admin bar menu. Go back here. And this will just be completely hidden altogether. So some people just don't like to see it. And I've actually been working on a lot of sites recently where there are so many admin bar menus that you start collapsing into a second row. And it's just so many plugins add admin bar menus that they can just get overwhelming sometimes. So
I think having the option there to take it out is definitely nice. I like it there. I'm going to leave mine there, but I like when at least plugins give you the option of being able to turn some of these things on and off, because it's just, you know how the WordPress admin is. Like, it can get so messy and like things are always in a different place depending on the plugin. So
yeah, and I actually turned it off on my sites. But it's because you can if you do like $Perfmatters on any URL, you can get to the script manager. So there are ways to access those things. If you're more of like a typer and just prefer everything at the keyboard, like you could turn the admin bar menu off and use your keyboard instead. So that's an option you have. Let's see here. Oh yeah, okay. Let's go to the script manager next. This is one thing. Oh, we need to fix that, I think. But we did change the UI in here too. Again, we moved to pills. Everything is alphabetical now. So get rid of this here. So before it was actually by how it loaded on the page in order, which can be helpful, but it wasn't as helpful when you were just needing to actually change things. So we had a lot of people requesting that we change it to alphabetical. So you can literally, if you're trying to find something already, you can go in here, see plugins, themes, everything's alphabetical, and then miscellaneous, which is just like core stuff. That's also sorted alphabetically by the name of the function itself.
Yeah, that makes it a whole lot easier to find everything.
So it is, and yeah, going back, we probably should have done that from the start, to be honest. But yeah, so that's a little cleaner now. And then debugging. This is something we should have added from day one, because I use it and my brother Brett uses it. We use it every single day, all day. Is we added a way to test with Perfmatters off without having to go deactivate the plugin. So let's say you're testing the front of the site, you see something broken. And you think like, well, maybe it's Perfmatters, one of my optimization plugins. So if you want to test Perfmatters quick, you can just do Perfmatters off, a question mark Perfmatters off up in the URL. And so now nothing from Perfmatters is actually running at all. And then you can actually go granular. And we have a doc about this too, if you want to go like bookmark it and use this later. But you can go Perfmatters JS off. That will turn off anything related to JS. So that will be lazy loading, defer JS, and delay.js. Delay.js is usually the one people want to turn off because that's usually the one that's sometimes breaks things on the front end. And then you can also do Perfmatters CSS off. And so if you're messing around with the unused CSS feature, you can test it with that off. And you can also run these through PageSpeed Insights and GT metrics as well. So let me bounce to, I just have something up here for later, but so like if you were going to go here, you could actually go Perfmatters off and run that through PageSpeed Insights. And that would work to easily test without having to go, deactivate Perfmatters, clear seems like there's 3 or 4 cache layers these days on most sites. So that can just be cumbersome. So like I use this hundreds of times a day when I'm just, I need to pinpoint what it's coming from. Is it CSS, JS? Is it Perfmatters at all? Something else?
Yeah, that's always my struggle is like, okay, something isn't working and now I have to figure out what is keeping it from working, right? So it's like, okay,
exactly.
Let me disable this plugin, go reload it. Let me go disable this plugin. And sometimes it's a combination of the two. So you go through like a million different steps, and the fact that I can just at least eliminate Perfmatters from, whatever this issue is by just adding like a string to the URL and be done with it is awesome. And I love too that you shared that you can do this inside the testing tools, because then you can really see, okay, what's the score with and without Perfmatters, especially in GT metrics where you can actually set the compare feature where you can have 2 of them side by side. So you can literally see how are these scores different with Perfmatters on and Perfmatters off without having to enable and disable the plugin, which is super cool.
Yep. Let's see here. Let's go. Okay, so the next thing we added here was under delay.js. So delay.js is definitely one of the most powerful features. There's other optimization plugins have it too now. It's really one of the only ways to speed up JS on a lot of these bigger sites is you can delay it, because what defer does is it just moves it to the bottom of the load order. Essentially, it doesn't, like if there's unused JS in a script, that doesn't fix that at all. And so delaying it is really your only option. And when I say delay, I mean delay on user interaction. So when you like interact with the page, then the JS still loads. But what we added was a quick exclusions option. So let's say you're running. So if you choose delay all scripts, it's going to delay all your JavaScript, except for some core stuff we have behind the scenes that we know needs to be there 100% of the time. We now have this thing called quick exclusions. So we'll detect what you're running based on a kind of a master list that we've been building up through. A lot of the lists we build up through tickets, working on sites for people and our own sites and troubleshooting. And we've been building that up for years, actually. And so see, on this site, we have Elementor running. I also have WooCommerce running. So things that might commonly need to be excluded, not 100%, because if it is, we'll usually just throw it in the core behind the scenes. But we don't like to do that, because if there's a chance you don't need to run it, we don't want to always exclude it, because that's going to hurt your performance. So, sure. However, if it's, I know on our last video, I'm not sure, you don't use Elementor anymore, do you, Kyle? Like really on new sites, you're more, correct, I think, generate blocks and generate press. But if you build the way you built Elementor sites without animations, without fancy third-party menus and stuff, you can actually get away on Elementor sites with delaying all the JS completely fine. Everything works beautifully. However, not a lot of people are meticulously building Elementor sites with everything stripped down like that. And so sometimes you will need to exclude like the base block of Elementor scripts. And so here you can just tick that on. We have Elementor search. And again, we have a whole list here, so we actually detect what's running. So I just have a few plugins on this test site installed to show you.
Yeah, and so I think this is worth kind of diving into just a little bit here to talk about this.
Sure.
Okay, so when you do those exclusions, before you had these presets, what you have to do is go load up the site and then go find whatever file's running. So it's usually digging into the inspection tool and looking for the actual script that's running. copy it, paste it into there, etc., and go through that as kind of a manual process. And you still will have to do that if it's not something they've built these exclusions for. But essentially what these are like kind of presets, right? So you've already done the work of saying, okay, well, if you're running this plugin and you have this feature on, this is one of the issues we see all the time. So instead of you having to go dick around and find all that, just check this box and we've already brought in all those exclusions for you, essentially, right?
Exactly. Yep. And essentially it gets even better over time because we're constantly doing tickets and we're constantly saying, this actually needs to be there most of the time. So we'll add this. And I think we were chatting just the other day about Termageddon. We're going to be adding, we're going to have that one in the next update. So the more popular plugins tend to get in there first because that's what we see people working with. But again, if you have something you're working with and think it needs to be in there, like always feel free to ping us and, we can take a look. Like we'll need to test it ourselves too to verify everything. But yeah, we're constantly improving that.
So you mentioned, I'll go back to the screen share here. You mentioned on this site, you just have Elementor and Woo installed. Are there any other real popular plugins you already have those quick exclusions built out for, just to give people an idea?
Yeah, we have actually, I could just probably do it off the top of my head here. We have Divi. We even have some Generate Press stuff in there. We have Oxygen. We have some cookie plugins. We have, just a variety of all random things. But again, it's probably the most popular stuff we see. Let me see if I can find a better list here really quick while we're looking.
Yeah, it was just to get an idea. I'm sure we can grab links too, and I can include this later if you have all that documented somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Another important one, I guess we have some third-party things like Mediavine. Lots of like food bloggers are running Mediavine network. It's a popular one, and so we have stuff like that. Ninja Forms, Revolution Slider. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of Revolution Slider because it is very heavy. But we have stuff in there. Smart Slider. That's a good one if you need a slider. I recommend that one. That's definitely lighter weight. So yeah, just stuff like that. Just all random popular things that people are using. And again, if you have something that you think should be in there, send us a message. We can definitely take a look.
We got a couple comments coming in on this subject that I'll interrupt with. Sure. One is Brent asked, is the Termageddon exclusion going to be related to the user-centric cookie solution?
It will. That's what it will be used for, because that's what we've been seeing some people struggle with lately. So yeah, the Termageddon, I think it's Termageddon plus user-centric WordPress plugin.
Yeah,
is what that'll be for.
Yeah, and I think that one's kind of tricky too, because the whole purpose of that is getting consent for all these things to load. So you need that to load in before you load in all the rest of the scripts that are being delayed. So there's a little trickery and like meta things happening behind the scenes there. Zach also asked if you have any for Beaver Builder set up, and we have another request for CrocoBlock.
Beaver Builder, we actually have some things behind the scenes already for JS. However, if there's a certain module or something that maybe needs to be excluded all the time, like we can definitely look at that. But we do have some core things that like have to be excluded 100% of the time for Beaver Builder. Okay. Those are already in there. So CrocoBlocks, I do actually see that regularly. We don't have anything in there yet for that, but we can definitely take a look at that one. I'm going to make a note and.
And we had another one in here that says, please provide an option to select the JS files. For example, if I select Elementor, it should automatically fetch all the JS files that are related to it. This would be very helpful to exclude any specific JavaScript files. So is that the way it works, or do you have these kind of like bundled essentially?
Yeah, that's not the way it works. Although that's an interesting idea. Is that we already have the bundle like for Elementor core on this site. We already know that like these are what people are dealing with, and these should be excluded. If you're having any issues, like the core thing needs to be excluded. And the reason it wouldn't be very helpful to just say like, click, then let me choose, is because many times there's a string of dependencies for how JS fires. And that's what we've already taken the time to debug here, is that like string of dependencies.
So I
Now,
guess if this is easy mode, right? There's some check
easy
boxes
mode,
that are
yeah.
done. And if you're more advanced and you're wanting to granularly go in there and do one at a time, well, then you probably know how to inspect the code and grab all those anyways, right?
Exactly. However, I actually kind of like that idea too. So I'm going to make a note of that.
And we also got some questions about
Yeah,
gravity
make
forms
a note.
and bricks, if you have any of those built up here.
Gravity forms is one we're actually adding soon. That's one I've actually been working on. And then what was the other one? Bricks.
Bricks builder.
Bricks, we actually have. I think we do have one in there, and then there's a core. I know we have one in core already behind the scenes for a certain section of bricks that always needs to be excluded. So yeah, bricks is one. We actually see a lot of bricks people lately. So yeah, that's one we've been working with closely already.
Okay, great.
Let's see here. The notes here. Okay, so now we're gonna dive into some nitty gritty stuff, and I've tried to make this as simple as possible. Sometimes optimization stuff, I mean, it is what it is, and so I'll try to explain it here. But it's on the topic of LCP, so largest contentful paint, which I think a lot of people are struggling with. If you've run any PageSpeed Insights at any time or GTmetrix test, you've probably seen LCP and wondered why is your LCP so high. So that's what we're going to dive into next. And let me just explain. LCP is basically it's the point in the page load when the main content is most likely to be loaded. So let's take let's just take this example test site here. So on this site, this is a very simple example, but I think it demonstrates it. Is if you were to guess what the LCP is on this page, what do you think it is?
It's got to be that giant featured image, right?
Yeah, the giant featured image. So, and that's essentially what it is on every site. Like, especially for blog posts, it's almost always the featured image, and 99% of the time, it's just the image at the top. Now, sometimes LCP can also be text, and it can also be other things, but most of the time, it's the image that you're dealing with. So, let me go back here. And so the problem is that for the LCP, I like to call the LCP pain point. And so on this site, like you want the LCP image to load right away, and it shouldn't be lazy loaded. So if we go over to I have a speed test here, we can see here, this is the warning that that most people are probably familiar with. They see this largest contentful paint element. And now this isn't a thing you need to fix. This is just telling you what it is. Some people I think mistake this for how do I fix the LCP? You can't, you will always have LCP on a site. But this tells you what you could improve on if it's not already optimized. And so we can see this image here is LCP. And they added this section here recently, which is actually very helpful. Is you can see the different attributes of the LCP image itself. So we can see time to first byte, which is like server response time of that image. This would be more with caching to fix that part. But then the load delay here is what we're really looking at. You can see that's 53% of the LCP is due to load delay. So essentially what you're wanting to do is how do you speed up the load delay of that LCP image? And that is where we're going to dive into a new feature called fetch here shortly. But let me explain a little bit more. Is that let's take an Elementor site. That's a big one. So you have 60, 70 requests with 20 images on the site. A lot of times I'll see like the featured image or the image in the header, the LCP image. I'll see that buried 20, 30 requests down. And it's not always necessarily the theme developer's fault or page builder's fault. Like it's just how things have been coded and how it is. And really you want that image to be way, way up higher and towards the top. So in the past, how we've fixed that was to just preload the image. And what you would do would bump the image up. And let me just show an example here of how you would used to do it. And then we're going to dive into a new way that we've added to do things. So we'll go to preloading here. We've also redid the UI here a little bit, so nothing will show until you click add new, which is a little cleaner. Before you would add an image URL here, preload the image, and essentially that bumps it up to the top of the page. Good to go. Kind of easy. The problem is with preloads, it's more of a manual thing. Now we do have like device types and things you can choose and locations. But again, this was one of a more one-off thing. Like what if you have, say, a featured image on a blog post, you would want all of them to be fixed, right? Not just one. So
right. You don't want to do that post by post.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm just using blogs as an example here. Like think of anything that could be an LCP image above the fold there. So manual preload is just not a great way to do things for that. And so we added our preload critical images a while back. And this helped because it allows you to look at the DOM, how the page is structured, and say, I want the first 1 to 4 images preloaded, or first 2 images preloaded on the structure there. And while this is helpful and actually works great on simple sites, I actually use that feature myself on most of our sites, and it works great. However, what we ran into over hundreds of tickets is eventually seeing that on more complex sites that sometimes they'll have images somehow loading in the order there up in the header that have nothing to do with, essentially they're loading first.
Right.
And they're actually loading way down the page.
They're
so
at the bottom of the page, but they're loading higher than the things that are high on the page.
In the DOM, when the Google loads the page, they're loading higher than they should be. And so what our thing will do, it's not, our thing just goes top to bottom. And so sometimes it will pick up things that we didn't want in there. And so we have filters that you can then go exclude things, and then you're really jerry-rigging things, which worked great for some people, but it was getting too complicated for other folks. So let's see here. Oh, and another problem with the manual preloads is, I don't know how much you deal with this, but there's things called source set and sizes now in images. Mm-hmm. So WordPress adds source set to make images responsive out of the box. When you upload an image, WordPress makes thumbnails. You have like 2 or 3 different thumbnails. And then it adds these source set tags to say, like, if it's on a mobile device, load the smaller thumbnail. If it's on a desktop. So when you're doing the manual preloads like that, you didn't have those attributes either. We thought about adding that, but then we are going to get into this new feature, which is actually kind of more useful for this type of thing.
Gotcha.
This is the new feature is called Fetch Priority. And I have a feeling that we're going to be, most people are going to be using this now instead of preloads in a lot of cases. And I'll go through when you should use one or the other here shortly. Basically, it's an attribute that's similar to preloading, but it allows you to assign different priorities, so low to high. So with preloading, you told it to preload, top of the waterfall. Doesn't matter what else is happening, that's what's going to happen. With fetch priority, it's essentially letting Google know that, hey, I think this image is high. It should load higher up in the waterfall because it's my LCP image. And so it's giving the browser more control to organize things that it's already determining how it should load. And WordPress 6.3 coming out is scheduled for August 8th. So I think that's next week.
Yeah, next week.
They are trying to automate some of this. And so we're piggybacking and adding features here for this as well. And they're going to automate adding fetch priority high on blog post images. So that across the board for some themes and page builders, it's not going to work for everything out of the box, unfortunately. But that will help across the board for LCP for folks. So I'm actually really excited about that. But we're taking that a step further and adding the fetch feature into Perfmatters. So if there's anything you need to add fetch on, you can add it on there.
So why don't you show us kind of how that works?
Yeah, so let's go to, we have this new feature here, and this fetch is actually going to be in the next Perfmatters update, scheduled for hopefully next week as well. So this is actually not in the plugin yet, but it's we've already got it built out and tested and working. But we add fetch here, and what you can do is add a class or an image name. You can do the same targeting. I need to fix some of the responsive queries on this here. But, and then you can choose a priority of low or high. So let's see here. Let's go give an example here. Now, in this simple example, WordPress is actually going to handle it. So awesome. But again, WordPress is not going to work with all these other complicated setups. And so that's why we're adding it. But if we inspect here, let's go add a class. It actually works on figures too. So, and I'll put we'll have a whole doc with like what you can put in here. And so I wouldn't worry too much about this, but see here, we have a block post featured image class. And what you could do then is drop this in here, kind of like that. Put a priority of high. We want it to just do all devices, which is fine. And then click save, and then it's fetched. And I'll show an example of that here working too. But essentially what that does is it's across the board now. So any featured image on the site will automatically get that, which is awesome. So
yeah, you're doing it globally instead of doing it one by one.
Globally, yeah, correct. Yeah. And we have this feature here called parent selector. So you can actually target classes that are higher up. This is something we haven't had before. The reason this is actually super powerful is because many themes and page builders don't add unique classes on the image tags themselves, but they do have something on the class above it. So in this example, see they have featured image, but that's actually not on the image itself. So you can do search by parent selector, and that will go like searching up above it. And then anything we see below that, it will add the fetch on there for you. So
in this case, if like the wrapper, the div that was wrapping the image had this class on it, but the class wasn't necessarily added to the image itself, that checkbox is going to account for that.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Because there's a ton, even I think page builders are getting better about that, but there's a lot of page builders that won't give you access to every one of the elements in there, right? So I know Elementor is terrible about this. Like if you add a class to something, you're actually adding a class to something like 3 elements up in the DOM, not the actual element itself. And you might not realize that if you're not in the code all the time. But something like this is going to save a ton of headaches when you think you're adding a class to something, but really you're adding the class to the parent element.
Exactly. Yeah. And I am seeing page builders get better about that, but I would say it's like a 30%, 70%, like 70% are kind of the scenario you said, like it's adding it further up or they don't have it at all. And then 30% are like the page builders that are more focused on like performance and have taken that into account. So I think that'll get better over time. But having the parent selector there is, it's incredibly powerful. Go back to my notes here. Oh, and the other important thing about that is because of how we're adding it, we're essentially just adding fetch to it. We're not grabbing it and doing anything else. So because of that, you're automatically getting this to work with the source set sizes. So if there's already responsive images there for mobile and desktop, we're just adding fetch to those. So those should automatically work with fetch. So you don't need to actually worry about the devices, even though we have an option there, you can change it. But so it should support literally almost anything out of the box. You can target almost any area that you want now. So yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
This will be incredibly helpful for LCP. And again, with the WordPress 6.3 update, again, that's going to help too, especially with blog posts on just generic templates that are using functions that WordPress wants you to use to get that fetch on there.
Sweet.
So let's go to Okay, yeah. So let's just, I have an example here quick. So here is this is actually a 6.2 site, and then I have a 6.3 site. It's identical sites. One's running, and if we can see here, so my test here was 2.2 for the LCP. Then we test 6.3, and I'm just using 6.3 because this is easy and it's adding fetch there. But we can see identical site dropped it down to 1.8. So a 2.2 down to 1.8, just by adding fetch to the featured image. So I mean, that's a huge improvement just by one little tag.
Right.
And again, you could do this before with preloads, but it was more of a manual process, and some people just skipped it because of that reason. And so now automating this feature essentially will just make it a lot more performant across the board. And if we go down to this thing I mentioned earlier, this load delay, on the 6.2 site without fetch, you can see load delay 53%. If we go down to LCP on the 6.3 per site with the fetch, we can see load delay is now 23%. So you can see it's speeding up the load of the LCP element.
Yeah, that's awesome that it's, WordPress is, I guess the performance team is getting on this and going to take some of this, into account automatically for us. But like you said, that's going to depend on, I think a lot of people in the admin bar probably aren't running just like default themes. They're using some kind of builder, and that complicates things that where WordPress might not pick all that up automatically. So it's great that in Perfmatters, we can go in there and, more precisely target the things we need rather than just hope that the automatic thing catches it,
Exactly. Yeah. And it really is down to the page builders and themes themselves to add support for what WordPress is looking for. So yeah, I'm excited about what the WordPress performance team has been doing lately. They're finally digging into the nitty gritty of like what we're dealing with every day. So yeah, kudos to them over there. I'm excited to see them doing stuff.
I think your job's still safe though.
Yeah, unfortunately, with all the themes and page builders and the different way they do things, yeah, and that's why we added this feature, because we want to and we're timing it with the release. So if people are playing with fetch, you can kind of go do this with the new 6.3 and with our new feature. And here's just a simple example, and then we'll move on from the fetch thing. But this is super important, so that's why I wanted to spend some time on it. Here's just a simple, again, this is just a dummy, very simple site, but here's the 6.2 site. I'm using this tool called Debug Bear. I actually really like this tool. It's kind of like a GTmetrix alternative, but it adds a lot of more details and stats on what's happening in the waterfall. We can see here the request for the featured image is 5 requests down. Now, if we go to the 6.3, it's actually 4 requests down. So it's slightly different than preload, because preload would have bumped the image up to the second request here right after the HTML doc. But what it's doing is it's telling Google, see, Google's already saying these 2 pieces of JavaScript already should be loading with a high priority. That's what Google is determining. And so then it looks at this fetch LCP high, and then it loads that next. So then it's bumping this one down, which it determines should not be loaded. And if we look at the name, comment reply, we can just determine that that's for the comments. And so it should not be loading above the featured image to begin with. So this fixes that problem. And again, on a large site, imagine the LCP image, like I've seen it buried 30 requests down. So imagine it bumping up 30 different times. That's what's going to happen on bigger sites. Okay, so let's to my notes here.
While you're grabbing on the next thing here, David was asking when that was going to come out in Perfmatters, and Brian said he's trying to time that with the release of 6.3, so kind of all those things work together too. That's correct, right?
Yeah, we're trying to target for August 8th, which I don't know if is a good idea or a bad idea. It's the same day as the WordPress 6.3 release, but it will be around the 8th of next week. So yeah, watch for it. We might try to push it out before just to give people some time, some heads up. But then, okay. one last thing. Again, I hope this is helpful because I know people are struggling with LCP, so that's why. When should you use fetch versus preloads? Just some simple things here. Fetch should be used for things like featured images, gallery images, resources above the fold. Now you can add this on CSS too and JS, but that's going to be, I would say, for more advanced users. Images is going to be 90% of the time. So, but for more advanced people, like you can do it to other resources. We do support those. And then preload should be used for things like CSS background images, above the fold fonts. You'll still want to use preloads for fonts, not fetch. And this is actually, Google doesn't actually support adding fetch on CSS background images. So this is important because I know a lot of people use page builders that sometimes are doing the backgrounds as CSS, not inline. So that's important there.
You pitched at me about that on more than one occasion when you logged into sites I built.
Yeah. And generate blocks lets you toggle the background image to load inline, which is way better because then lazy loaders can pick it up. So if you have a page builder that lets you move your background image to inline option, that's way better for plugins like ours because then we can see it right away and actually help optimize it.
I try to remember to do that, but I'll admit I'm not 100% on it.
Yeah. I wish that was the default option, and maybe we'll get there someday with some page builder. Maybe they'll do that as the default instead of CSS. But okay. And one last thing here is this has nothing to do with Perfmatters, but is on LCP. The topic of LCP is, remember that LCP is not just images. So when you run PageSpeed Insights, you see this warning here. Fixing that alone will not fix all the LCP. LCP is render blocking resources. It's unused CSS. It's images. It's everything impacts LCP. However, the biggest contributor, more than images itself, is time to first byte, which is server response time. And so I can't stress this enough. TTFB it's just so important these days. And so here's an example of 2 speed tests I ran. This was on a dummy site I was running WP fastest cache plugin, just simple bare bones caching plugin, no CDNs. I ran a test from San Antonio, Texas, and the LCP was 622 milliseconds. This is on desktop, so it was fast, great. Then I ran the same test, ran it from Mumbai, India. So across the world, the LCP was 2.6 seconds. So we went from 622 milliseconds to 2.6 seconds. And that's just by changing the location. The LCP jumped 318%. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that if you're targeting global people anywhere, things like edge cache and CDNs are more important than they ever have been in the past. So things like Cloudflare APO, which does edge caching, serves your entire site from the CDN essentially. There's a free plugin called Super Page Cache for Cloudflare. Great free plugin. If you want a completely free way to do it with Cloudflare, highly recommend that one. And then there's integrations now with like Kinsta. Cloudways just launched their edge cache integration. So I know, Kyle, that you're a Cloudways user. So like they just launched that feature. It works great. I've seen it already on some client sites. But those things are more important than ever to fix your LCP. So I've chatted with a lot of people and they don't make the connection between server response time and LCP. So that's why I want to stress that.
Yeah, and I know we're talking with a lot of people here, obviously watching this, that come from the admin bar community, or people that are going to be probably spending a little bit more money on hosting too. But if you found this and you're not a developer, you're just managing your own website that you've built, you got to spend a little bit of money on hosting, because that's going to be another thing that kills your time to first byte. Is if you're running some shared server that costs you $2 a month, it's probably not going to cut it, even if the server is just down the road or in your basement. It's going to be a lot tougher than if you're actually spending just a little bit of money. You don't have to spend a ton of money on a server, but those really budget shared hostings are just going to give you nothing but problems as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't stress that enough. I mean, having worked at Kinsta, that was our whole you get what you pay for when it comes to hosting. That's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I know Kinsta, to be fair, it's on the definite higher end for what most people are doing, right? Most people don't want to spend, I don't know, what's the cheapest, $38, $35 a site or whatever. But there are in betweens there where you're going to be fine on the time to first byte, and you're going to have to spend more than $2 though.
Cloudways is a good example of one I think that hits kind of in the middle area, and you can get great performance, and they have this Cloudflare Edge Cache feature now. So, and there's other hosts too, like Rocket.net. It's another popular one recently I've been seeing. They have the Cloudflare Edge Cache. So like a lot of hosts are adding this Edge Cache, but some people don't know about it either. If your host has it, enable it, and it will help with LCP. So that's.
But before, I think we're moving on to a new subject now. We did have a couple things in here. David asked, does fetch priority not work even with inline background images? I'm trying to wrap my head around the double negatives here. Does fetch priority not work even with inline background images?
It will not, unfortunately. And the reason it can't is because inline background images aren't actually added as image tags, and Google only supports image tags and figure tags, essentially. But inline background images are added still as a background image, just inline. And our lazy loaders can see that stuff, but Fetch does not support tags like that. And it's nothing we can add because it's not even supported by Google. So unfortunately, that won't work either. So my suggestion for a background image would actually probably be to use preload. And that's actually what Google's docs recommend too. They say, use preload for background images, preloads for fonts, those things. Think of anything not background images that you want to automate. That's what you want to use Fetch for.
Gotcha. Zach also said in Beaver Builder, if you add the FL row, we got a bunch of selectors here, to Perfmatters lazy load background input, that will catch most of those. And he asks in here, Brian, this might be a good one to add to the defaults, ?
Oh, okay. Okay. Making a note of that. Right. Okay.
Got a question here about Name Hero as hosting. I think, that seems like one of the ones that you could buy some $2 shared hosting there. So it's probably going to depend on what plan you're on.
Yeah, it's that's one I would personally stay away from. I mean, anybody that offers something at $2 starting base just tells me what they're doing further down the plans as well. No one's gonna offer great performance and offer a $2 plan. That's just not how the hosting industry works. So I would look at hosts that start at least, I don't want to put a price on this, but I mean, at least at $10 a month or something. Like, try not to look at anything under that. I mean,
and this is probably better saved for a later conversation. We do like an AMA type thing, but like we'll use Cloudways as an example. You can get a server on there for, $10-12 or whatever, and you can put multiple websites on it. And if you have small websites that don't have a lot of traffic, you might only be paying $2 per site to host them. I know I have some in that range and they're still doing great. But you're not going to be buying like a $2 package essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Charlie asked in here, are background images ever considered LCP images?
They can be. Yeah, they can be.
Okay.
And I'm thinking back to what I said earlier. I actually think there are some page builders that add the image as an image tag. So I want to almost say that it's kind of 50-50 on that. So it depends on what you're using. That Fetch might work on it or not. But again, it's not up to us. It's because Google they only support image tags. And so so you'd have to look. I'm going to make a note of that because we could put a list in a doc for this feature of like, if you're using Elementor, like it doesn't support the background image part, for this or something like that, just so you can kind of see right away what it would do.
Yeah. I think that probably organized by like what tech stack people are using would be helpful. That way people can just see like, okay, here's what I use. Here's what I need to know. David asked in here, would it be possible to add class selectors to the preload parsing as well?
Class selectors. Yes. And that's actually something we were going through this fetch stuff and adding this parent selector stuff. We were like, maybe we should go back and kind of look at this preload stuff again too. So the preload classes is something we're going to be updating as well.
Yeah, because that gives you the ability to do this a little bit more globally too. Because I think about things like, on my normal pages, I'm going to have a background image in the hero section or something like that with some kind of overlay. And it's going to be a different image every time. And so setting up all these preloads is a pain in the ass. But if I was able to just say, hey, in my template for this hero, give this section a class, and we could use that parent selector thing, boom, all those could be preloaded without having to do them one by one for every page, and remember to go do that, down the road and stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, great question. And so definitely one we are going to be adding. And one last thing on the hosting, I will just say, like, because I know $10 a month, I know with a lot of clients we work with, like, that's actually like, oh my God, that's expensive. So there's a whole range of people. And if you're needing a more budget host, like SiteGround is actually pretty great. If you need something cheaper. So I just want to throw that out there because I know not everyone can even afford like Cloudways even.
Sure.
So, but like you said, if you have multiple sites, Cloudways is a great way to like divvy it up per site at the pricing. So
for sure. Sweet. All right. Well, we'll go back to screen sharing and move on to the next part.
Okay. So we're going to go to, we added this new section called advanced options. And basically this allows you to, there's a lot of niche cases when it comes to, optimization. Not everyone deals with these. And so we've added this toggle called advanced options, which toggles on different things that people deal with on a regular basis that we've seen that allow you to more fine tune your sites.
Brian, let me interject with one little technical thing real quick. For whatever reason, StreamYard, when your mouse is off from the position you're actually pointing at, so when you're using it to point at something, we're seeing something, like 10% down the screen. So if you would highlight those things, we can see what you're highlighting, but just the pointer isn't lining up for whatever reason.
Sure. So here I'm going to enable advanced options, and we can see here I do get a little warning because it is advanced for a reason. It is more tweaking your site, fine tuning it. Go ahead, okay. And then we're going to dive into, let me see the first one here. The first one is defer JavaScript. So before this include jQuery, you see this here, we have a warning on it, defer jQuery. That can break a lot of sites, actually, we've discovered. And so that should have really never been in there from the first. And so we've now that's now behind the advanced options. So if you have advanced options off, I just turned it on, but if you have advanced options off, that won't show up there anymore. So if you go to defer JavaScript, you just see defer and exclusions, and that's it. So deferring jQuery only works on more simple sites. And I would say 95% of the sites we work on are not simple.
And I will say it's worth noting, when you turn on that toggle for the advanced options, it doesn't load advanced options right underneath that toggle. It's loading all the advanced options wherever they belong throughout the plugin. So basically, when you turn that on, you're going to see more options everywhere rather than a list of options right underneath that toggle.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. And we've also been debating of adding an advanced toggle on the top right-hand side, just on each page. So if anyone has an opinion on that, tweet me if you think that'd be helpful, instead of having to go to it and then go back. Because some people, like myself, I tend to toggle this on most sites I work on because I already know what I'm doing. So it can be kind of a pain to just like go in there, toggle it on, and then have to go back and then do the settings. So having it in the top right or accessible somewhere else might be useful for some folks. If it is, let me know.
I vote for that. So +1 from me.
Okay, sounds good. The next one is click delay. So under JavaScript, delay all, we have this thing called disable click delay. And why this is important is, I'll give an example of where you would use this, is say you delay all JavaScript on an Elementor site, and then you go on your mobile phone, you click the menu, and for some reason it takes a little bit to load. You can feel it. You're like, why? This is like taking a little longer than it should. And it's because if you're delaying all the JS, the event listeners have to fire, and it has to wait for all the JS to load before that fires. And so that's why you feel like sometimes that little hesitation sometimes. And again, this will depend on what you're using. But disabling the click delay essentially reorders this in the background and allows the menu to fire essentially right away. And you're still allowed to delay all the JS.
So maybe a simple way to look at that is if you've done these optimizations and whatever your first action is, if it feels like there's a little bit of a lag on that first interaction there on your touch device, then this might help solve that issue.
Correct. Yeah. And the reason we don't, might be wondering like, well, why don't you just do that from the beginning if it still works for everything? The reason is because you do have to have your exclusions all working properly for the click delay to exclude things. So like if you're using quick exclusions and you're good to go and just disable click delay, then that's all you need to do. If you have a more advanced site where you have to have a manual exclusion in there, like that would be required for the click delay to work as well.
Gotcha.
But with quick exclusions now, it's much easier to get to the click delay working right away. So
yeah, I imagine a good chunk of us are just going to use those default options. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, and a site like GeneratePress, like those sites, they won't even need this. So we're just talking sites with like lots of JavaScript as sites that are going to notice this, like Aveda, really heavy Elementor sites, stuff like that is going to probably notice a little delay. And the reason that's also important is that there is this new metric coming to Core Web Vitals in March 2024 called INP, Interaction Index Paint. And I know you asked me about this, Kyle, too, and we've had other people ask, like, what is INP? And so basically what that is it's measuring the time after first interaction. So when you go to a site, click something, then they're starting to measure that. So this JavaScript stuff, optimizing your JavaScript is going to become super, super important for INP. And things like the click delay can help because it speeds up that interaction there, while you're still allowed to delay the rest of the JS. So click delay on heavy sites will actually help with the INP. And just since we're on the topic of INP quick, is that most INP we've seen and talking with some clients is that a lot of it's from third-party JavaScript. So some of it we've seen from inline or from on-site JavaScript, but a lot of it's from like Mediavine, GTag, third-party heavy stuff like that. And so delaying JavaScript is going to be very important and fine-tuning that as well. So because of that, we're also adding an improvement in this next update to how the individual delay fires. So this other option here, you can say delay specified scripts. And this is where you'd want to put in your scripts. This is for people that want to put them in there manually. In the past, there's been problems with more complicated things due to JS triggers and how event listeners fire. Things could get out of order and actually the delays wouldn't work properly. We're fixing that with this next update. And now you can add things in there and the event triggers will fire successfully without breaking with individual JS delay. So this is important because once INP rolls out, on some sites, it might be more useful to use the individual JS delay rather than delay all. But again, I can't say that confidently yet because I haven't done enough testing with the INP. But again, having things like this there working properly to allow you to do either will be important. So.
Yeah, and John just asked in here, will INP negatively affect delay JS benefits? So I guess that's time will tell.
Time will tell. And again, it's hard to say yet because we've seen it heavily focused on third-party JavaScript. And so then you're wondering like, well, if you delay a third-party JavaScript, is that going to impact it? But it's the interaction to paint as well. So there's a lot of things going on here. So delay will still be very useful. But as far as saying will delay all be less useful compared to delay individual, it's hard to say on that yet. So I don't want to say anything until we're further along and I've done more testing.
That'll be for a future stream.
A future stream, yeah. And again, Google will be making so many updates to that between now and then. So I would not worry about that yet. But we'll have a lot more about that later. Okay, let's see. Next option, the next advanced option is we have this enable fast click. This essentially enables a third-party library for some sites. Again, this is sites that are like heavy Mediavine scripts, heavy JS. Sometimes they had issues where on iOS devices, you'd have to double click on a link. Super annoying. It's an iOS issue. And essentially this adds a third-party library locally. So it's locally from your site. And it fixes like that double click issue. We've seen this going away recently. So I don't know if something's actually been fixed on the iOS side. So, if it's 100% fixed and confirmed, we might end up removing this down the road. But again, that's there if people are running into the double click issue on iOS devices. And then let's go into, this is another one I'm excited about, is we added a feature called exclude by parent selector under our lazy loading. So the reason this is powerful is that you don't want to lazy load things above the fold typically, as we kind of discussed this with fetch already. And the problem in the past, again, has been, how do you automate this? Like, you can't just use a file name because then it's, individual. And a lot of times themes and page builders don't have unique classes, which is frustrating. So now we've added this parent selector. So you can go, again, same idea, parent container div. You can target that now and it will automatically exclude it for you. So across the whole site, across the board. And that's kind of what we're focused on for things going forward, allowing to do it this way for stuff. So we're excited about that.
That's huge, again, for things like your blog featured images or like hero backgrounds and things like that. While we're sitting here on the lazy loading page, we had a question come in earlier asking if y'all are going to make skeleton animation loading available with lazy loading images.
What, skeleton?
That is what they asked here. When is skeleton animation loading will be available? I'm not familiar with that term, so I was hoping I'd pass that one off to you. But I have seen like lazy loading where it will load in like a almost like a default looking image and then load in the real image. Maybe that's what they're talking about here.
Okay.
I will expand on this.
Yeah, expand, or I'll Google it after the call here, and I'll look it up and see if it is. I mean, yeah, if it's something we can support, like we can definitely look into it.
Perfect. Didn't mean to derail you. Carry on.
No, I'm curious what that is. So yeah, I'll definitely go look that up. Let me just go back into. Oh yeah, okay. And the other thing to say about this is that with WordPress 6.3, them adding that fetch for featured images, we're going to piggyback off that automatically and see if something has fetch on an image, we're going to automatically exclude it from lazy loading for you, because you should never have that tag on the same thing, if that makes sense. If you're fetching it, you should not be lazy loaded. So anything WordPress is doing in core now in the new update, we will just exclude it for you for lazy loading. That means for featured images across the board, I think on most sites will be a lot better.
And Kevin Geary did chime in here. I think I was on the right track here. The skeleton loading is where the site loads a wireframe view of the components while the real components load, like you see on a lot of apps and social media sites and stuff.
Got it. I will. Yeah, we make a note of that. We'll look into it. Yeah.
Sweet.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah. let's see. Okay, so next thing we added was under fonts, local hosting fonts. We added this load asynchronously
If you
option.
would highlight where it says load asynchronously
Oh, sure.
yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Right here.
I don't know why it's just so far down below. It looks like you're waving at nothing.
Okay.
My apologies on that.
So we added this load async, and essentially what this does is it loads the CSS from our fonts asynchronously, so that they're not like in the critical chain requests and page speed insights. The reason we didn't do that just off the bat was if you're not preloading your fonts, it can cause CLS sometimes, and CLS is super important. So we put it under advanced to be for those that want to fix that problem. But it assumes that like you should be really preloading your fonts if you're using this option as well. Let's go to next one. Other one we have is just unused CSS. We added a URL. Let me highlight this here. Option under unused CSS, and this is more for like third-party CDNs, but on some more complicated sites. Sometimes you need to map this differently on hosts like Pantheon and stuff. They have some weird URLs going on, and so for unused CSS, this allows you to put that in there.
Well. Nice.
And then under, go to disable cart fragments. We made some big updates to this. And essentially now, before it was causing some issues on some sites. And so we've added more logic in there. Basically now it checks to see like if the WooCommerce cart hash cookie exists. And if it does, it means something's in the cart. And then we load cart fragments. If there's nothing in the cart, then we basically disable cart fragments. This helps with the performance and speed tests and everything. So essentially, cart should have cart fragments loading. No cart fragments.
So if you're running a WooCommerce site, would you recommend just going ahead and turning this on, or what's going to make you decide whether or not you need to use this feature in Perfmatters?
If you're running WooCommerce, I would just go ahead and turn this on. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's pretty safe now because we're doing the detecting even if there's something in the cart or not. So
sweet.
And let's see. Next one we added was and I should say on the cart fragments, that was not an advanced feature. So we're out of the advanced features here.
Okay.
Cart fragments is just, that's under the WooCommerce options. And so this other new feature then we added was minimal analytics for V4, for Google Analytics 4. Now, this is a mess here and will be clean soon. They've officially, shut down Universal Analytics. However, not technically. It's still running. I'm checking this like on a weekly basis to see when they actually shut down the servers for that. So we will be removing like G-tag, minimal inline. These will all be gone, and analytics.js will be gone. So you'll only have G-tag, which is Google Analytics 4, and then minimal V4, which it's like a stripped down version. For those that they're not doing conversion tracking events. All they care about is, like page traffic to see like what's hitting on their site. So that's just like a minimal version of Google Analytics 4. If you just want a small thing, don't use all the crazy data in there. That's what that's for.
Is there? I'm assuming that's documented somewhere so people would know what's actually being taken away from the minimal one versus the fully featured one?
Yeah, I have that in our doc, and it mentions like what works and what doesn't, kind of a thing. Like like page views. I think time on the site. There's only a couple things it looks at, and so you can look on the doc and see what it handles. Again, like if you're running a e-commerce site, like you're definitely not going to want to use that. But for more basic, like if you're just a blogger, like I've seen lots of people use that. So
yeah.
And then we've gotten down into Oh yeah, let me see if I can pull this up. So we added WP CLI support, and basically this is like a command line for WordPress. If someone's not familiar with it, we have a lot of agencies and developers that use this. I think they like automating things from the command line with their integrations. And so let me. That is not what I wanted. If X behaves here. Okay, there we go. So I just have a short video here of the command line here, and it just kind of gives you an idea. Is that full screen over there? I'm not sure if that is.
It's showing like a click to exit full screen screen, but we're not actually seeing the video.
Oh, okay.
Leave it small.
So yeah, here basically this just gives you an example of what it's doing, but there are a lot of people using WordPress this way. So if this looks crazy to you, it is a little crazy. But you can connect to WordPress command line, run your commands, and like you can now update Perfmatters. You can insert the license and activate Perfmatters. You can deactivate the plugin. And we're going to keep adding more and more features for WP CLI, so you can do all sorts of things. So again, this is a niche kind of developer crowd that's using this feature, but it's something we're going to keep adding to. So
looks foreign to me, so I'll stay out of that one.
And then the other thing we did since our last call was we've added 9 new filters. So we have these filters on this. I'll just bring up our site here. We have these filters to further customize. And again, this is more for developers to customize how these individual features work. And so you can go through here. Each one has like an example, how to use it, what it's used for. We added some for lazy loading, changing how the buffer loads. Some of this gets super, super technical. How unused CSS loads, how preload critical images works, image dimensions, stuff like that. So people can go check that out and see if they're needing a filter. But yeah, we keep adding filters, and again, these are more for the technical crowd. Let me go back here.
I've grabbed a couple questions here. People have asked, just so sure. You know, I'm not ignoring you, but I'm going to save these to see if we have time. I don't know what like percentage we're through your list there, Brian, but if we have time, we can ask a few of these, but I don't know.
I just have one paragraph left, actually.
Okay,
and then I'm done.
And we'll probably get some of these because we do have a little bit of time left, but I just didn't want to interrupt with something that wasn't relevant to what we were speaking about all the time.
So this last thing, and I'll bring this up as an example here. This is kind of a cool little tool, and I don't know where we could share this. I could tweet it out later too if people want the link. But there's this thing called the score calculator. I don't know if you've ever seen this.
I haven't.
You can actually play with it and see what your score will be, depending on. So like if you think if you know what your LCP is going to be, or like think you can improve it by that much, you can actually see what your score would be without running PageSpeed Insight tests. So, and it kind of gives you a really good gauge of like, we have a lot of people say like they think that this is hurting them more than it is. And so this is a great way to see like, well, if you drop that by 50%, it's actually not going to help your scores that much. So don't spend time on that. So this is a cool little way you can like play with that. But the reason I bring that up is I wanted to just mention another thing we see people struggling with, which is CLS. Earlier this year, Google dropped time to interactive metric, and it's now shifted to CLS. So before, time to interactive had a 10% weight out of the total 100 score. And now CLS, that's shifted to CLS. So CLS now makes up 25% of the total score for Core Web Vitals, essentially. So I can't stress enough again how important CLS is. And CLS is not something an optimization plugin like ours can fix. That comes down to page builders and themes. So like shifts on a page, that's what CLS is, something jumping around. If you have CLS out of the box, something is wrong, and recommend chatting with your theme developer or page builder. Now, if you're messing with things in optimization, you can cause CLS sometimes. But again, if you're just bare bones, like you should have zero CLS. Like if you're running Generate Press with Generate Blocks, have changed nothing else, you should have zero CLS because they pay attention to that quite a bit. But again, just something to keep an eye on. And I wanted to point out how important that is because I've seen a lot of people running speed tests and they're kind of just ignoring the CLS attribute. And when it's weighted at 25%, you can't really ignore it. That needs to be fixed.
That's a decent chunk at this point.
Yeah, decent chunk. And I think that's it actually. So yeah, that's all the new features we've added. And I just had a note about saying like that we might be doing the AMA video later. I think we should. Because I think we could, I could ramble on forever about performance related stuff. And I think we chatted earlier that you think that it might be useful for people just to ask any question like what caching plugin to use, what hosting provider to use. And I'll, just give out my recommendation.
For sure. Yeah. Obviously, you're a wealth of knowledge about your own plugin, but you're also just a wealth of knowledge in performance things in general. And there's a lot more just outside of Perfmatters world that I think we could get a lot of value from. So I'm going to work on setting something like that up. Maybe we can have a place for people to send in questions. We are probably going to do this one like pre-recorded where me and Brian can get on there, and that way he can prepare some of these answers and make sure he's given accurate information. Some of those things can be hard to do off the seat of your pants, right? But I'm going to ask you to do that anyways right now, just on a couple of these little questions. So
sure.
Before we wrap up, I grabbed a couple here from the chat, and sorry if I didn't grab your name in all of these. I think I just grabbed the question. This one kind of goes along with what you were just saying on caching plugins and giving some advice here, but also ties into Perfmatters. They ask if they have WP Rocket and Perfmatters, how do they determine when those features cross over, when there's certain things Perfmatters and WP Rocket does, how do you determine which plugin to use them on?
That's a good question because there is overlap, and I mean it's not just Rocket. There's a lot of plugins, optimization plugins out there doing similar things. So when it comes to like delay.js, lazy loading, we're all doing things in a slightly different way. So my recommendation is always actually to see what works better for your site and roll with that. I think Rocket's great. I love their UI. I think they do a lot of great things over there. And like I used to use Rocket back in the day myself. So they have a great team. But again, like for delay.js, like we allow you to delay individual JS too, not just all. And I think they've gone more the delay all with exclusion route. So we're trying to keep both because we think both is important, especially with the INP stuff happening. And with our lazy loading, we have a lot more advanced features in our lazy loading than they do. So I would say a lot of our features you can fine tune more, I guess would be the answer to that. So it depends on what you're needing. But again, test yourself. Like if one works better, the cool thing is we're constantly working on compatibility with Rocket. So like we assume people are running both sometimes already.
Sure.
Because so you can use delay.js in one, unuse CSS in another, works completely fine. We've tried to make sure all that works fine. So you can use one or use both.
The word of caution would be don't use the same feature in both plugins, though.
Yes, definitely don't do that.
And I'll add to this too. If you're struggling with which one to use on certain things, I would run into a problem and then send in a support ticket to both of them and see which answer you like better. So
And again, we don't do caching. So they do caching. They started as a caching plugin. They do that really, really well. I think they're one of the best caching plugins out there, to be honest. But again, there are hosting providers now too where you don't need a caching plugin. So there's like this hybrid approach to like Kinsta. You don't need Rocket at Kinsta because they do caching for you. Cloudways is then in a different scenario where I actually recommend using Breeze at Cloudways because they have all these different caching layers, Varnish. They now have their edge cache at Cloudways. And really, you want to piggyback off the developers working in their environment right away to integrate with those features. So SiteGround, I recommend using Site SG Optimizer for their cache features. So, use who knows the environment the best. That's what I recommend.
Right.
And then you can use Perfmatters for the front end stuff, but for caching, you want to use what the people that are building the caching environment as well. So.
All right, I'm going to pop one on the screen here. Jason had asked, do you support other analytics like User Maven? He's trying to get rid of Google anyhow. And yep, I don't use Google Analytics either. So what's your thoughts on supporting some of these other analytics softwares?
And I will be completely honest, I don't use Google Analytics either. Although I work with Google Analytics every day on client sites, but we use Fathom. Huge shout out to Fathom. I think that's who you use as well.
Yep.
So we are going to be adding, we're basically ripping out all the old GA stuff here once they officially shut down the servers for that. And then I want to look at adding like support for Fathom and some of these other third-party ones. And again, it will depend on how they do things to see if it's even possible to host it locally. Or maybe it's not even a local hosting thing. Maybe it's just allowing you to add in your ID and say, I'm using Fathom, and that's it. So you don't have to install, sometimes they have their own little WordPress plugin,
Yep.
So if we could just add a quick little thing in there to like even support all the third-party plugins and just add your thing in there, like that's what we're going to look at. So yeah, stuff like that is definitely coming.
Perfect. All right. So we had another question here about Perfmatters having an option to upload custom fonts. So instead of just being able to load in the Google fonts locally, what about being able to just upload your own fonts?
That is something, it's on our radar, and I have a task for it already. So we're going to look at doing that. I don't have an ETA on it yet, but we've gotten a lot of requests for that. Some from even the Generate Blocks team people have actually asked for that as well.
Yeah,
so
I mean, there's obviously you can search the repo and find plugins that will already do this, but I'm sure that's a really hard balance for you to say, like, okay, we need to stay in our lane and focus on what we're doing when there's a million things you could add in here. It would be nice to not have to add another plugin if Perfmatters kind of handled this for me, but I guess you have to deal with like, where do we draw the line on things we're going to add to the plugin and things that we're just going to stay out of. Caching is another example, right? Like, it would make sense to have caching inside Perfmatters, but is that where you want to go?
Yeah, exactly. Especially, yeah. And with fonts, I can see that maybe we add that because we already have a directory where we store the local fonts that we grab when we do that. So like we already have the location. We already can just easily dump them in there. So I can see us adding that. So no promises or ETA on that, but definitely it's one we're looking at. So.
Perfect. Somebody asked, is there a method for tracking down or solving CLS issues when delaying JavaScript? As to their knowledge, Google or the Search Console doesn't show any actual error.
I would actually say most CLS comes from CSS issues, not JavaScript. But it's not impossible either. I have seen CLS from JS. However, I'm actually working on a CLS doc for this because I get questions, so many questions about this that I've just started putting together a doc that I'm going to be publishing about how to track down CLS. There are a couple tools I use. Debug Bear. Let me actually pull that up here.
Yeah, you want me to share screen again?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll show on here because there might not be any. So, oh yeah. There's no CLS on this site, but so like you can click on here and essentially it will show it right here, layout shifts. And Debug Bear is actually pretty accurate at this, better in my opinion than PageSpeed Insights. Or there's some Chrome extensions out there to track it too, but like I have actually been using Debug Bear for this and it's pretty good. Another one is Web Page Test, which is a kind of like a GTmetrix 2. Their CLS detection is very good too. So Debug Bear, Web Page Test, just try. These are both free too. Like check out their tools for debugging the CLS. The PageSpeed Insights one, in my opinion, is pretty bad. It's not very accurate. So I've had better success with those. And there are a few Chrome extensions you can Google that are sometimes helpful as well for CLS. That would be the way to go about it.
Sweet. All right. Well, we'll start wrapping this up then. I do want to remind everybody a couple things we talked about here. If there was some questions that came in the chat asking about some specific things to optimize, look on our channel, look on the Admin Bars channel for Perfmatters. We've done 2 of these live streams already. The first one we went through at the time every single setting inside Perfmatters one by one and talked about what they're there for, when you would use them, those kinds of things. The second live stream we did, Brian optimized 2 sites live on the call. One was a Generate Press and Generate Block site. The other was an Elementor site. Both of those have chapter markings on them inside the YouTube video, so you can jump to the things you have questions on. That first video is really good if you get some toggle inside of Perfmatters that you don't understand. Of course, there's tooltips, there's help docs and all that, but if you're a visual person like I am, it might be helpful to go to that video. You can jump right to that section of the video and hear what Brian has to say about that. Obviously, that thing's about a year old now, and we just went over a bunch of things that have been added to Perfmatters since then. Those things that are newer obviously aren't in that video. But the second video we did where we optimized 2 live sites, you're going to see his entire process of an Elementor site, especially because there was so much more to do on that. It was a lot of like, let's go test it. We look at the first metric that's wrong and we go back and find the things in the Perfmatters plugin that help solve that. It's really, really useful if you're trying to figure out, what kinds of things are important inside this plugin. Because, like you said, it's a complex plugin, but by nature, because you have to have a lot of complex things going on. So I think that's a really helpful video. And I told Brian, as we chatted the other day, to kind of prepare for this call, I'm a huge fan, and I tell everybody, or make sure everybody knows, that there is an export import feature inside Perfmatters. So once you get your settings working in your stack the way it's working really well, you can export those settings and then import them into sites. From my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I kind of look at this as like a 80-20 thing. So I can do about 80% of those optimizations that are going to work for every one of my sites because I'm using the same tool stack over and over and over again. So it's not a huge problem. And then there's 20% of like, what fonts do I need to preload here? Or what selectors do I need to put in to exclude these things? There's the little tweaks that you might need to do on a site-by-site basis, but you can get a lot of it done one time watching one of those optimization videos we did. Do it one time, export that out, and you've gotten the bulk of the work already done for you.
Yep. No, that's a good point. Yep.
Sweet. All right. Well, we'll wrap this up. Like we said, we're looking at doing some kind of like performance AMA with Brian here coming up soon. So keep a look out inside the group for that. We'll have information on maybe some forms you can fill out. So collect your performance related questions. Like we said, it's not going to have to do just necessarily specifically with Perfmatters. We can look at all kinds of performance things. And we'll try to do an AMA on that. And then we're talking about next year, at the beginning of the year, doing another video where we kind of walk through the plugin from beginning to end. It's always changing. So we'll have another concise video on that. Brian, if people are interested in following you, I have added a little banner here to our stream that shows where they can subscribe to your newsletter. I believe that just comes out once a month, and it just came out like a week ago. So you got a little bit of ways to wait on that, but I know you're a Twitter/X person as well. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah. So Twitter, X, at Brian Lee Jackson, on there. And then, my Substack there is Kyle's put it up. I don't get as much time to write these days with the plugin development stuff, but I am consistent. I've been doing the newsletter for like two, I think, plus years now, consistently every single month. So, and I include actually our change logs for the plugins in the newsletter. So if you're wanting to follow or just get updated about what's changing in the plugin every month, like that's a great way to do it. I just throw it in my personal newsletter. And then I have, I talk about WordPress marketing and some other topics in there too.
Yeah, we got some Bitcoin. We got some
Bitcoin,
AI.
Bitcoin. I was going to leave that out, but now that you brought it up,
hey, I don't mean this offensive at all, but it's a very good newsletter for nerds, man. And I'm all about
it's definitely a nerd newsletter. Yeah, I will admit that.
And there's also information. I know we need to just do a talk on this because we've not spent much time on it, but obviously all the stuff y'all are doing with NovaShare as well, which is y'all's other plugin. Why don't you give us a quick little plug for NovaShare while we're here before we wrap up?
Yeah. So yeah, NovaShare is just, we created it because I was frustrated over the years. I've always used social media plugins, and was just annoyed that they didn't pay any attention to performance. So we built ours from the ground up, and everything is super hyper focused for performance. We're even go back and refactoring code and making it smaller. So it's, yeah, everything is just, if you're looking for a social sharing plugin that's like focused on core web vitals, page speed insights, not showing any warnings, like that's definitely one I think you should check out. And we just finished, we're excited, this last month we now have blocks for every feature. So we're big fans of the block editor, and I think that's the future for design, at least in the WordPress space. And so we have a share block, we have a follow block, we have a click to tweet block. So you can do everything now on the fly, in the editor, see it, and tweak things.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, if you're doing any kind of like content-based website, I'll admit, I don't go to a lot of sites and like share articles from the share buttons, but you're missing out on an opportunity by not having it on there. It's literally like one little thing to add to your blog post template, and maybe that gets you some more eyeballs every month. So you're kind of wasting space, I think, if you're not adding that. So definitely a cool plugin. You'll see it anytime I have those share buttons on my sites. You'll have to know that it's NovaShare for sure.
Awesome.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us. We kept about 50 people on here the entire time. So I know we're getting into some heavy stuff here, but that's great.
Yeah, sorry that it's so technical this time around for everybody, but I think we just needed to catch up on all that stuff. And then like Kyle said, we'll do some other videos. We'll do start to finish again, and I think an AMA will be super helpful for folks. I've never done one, so I'm excited I'd love to help answer people's questions because I've been doing this for quite a while now. So definitely have some thoughts.
I send mine to him all the time. He's sick of me. He just has stuck my email address in his spam folder. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. Good to see everybody today. Have a great weekend, and we will catch you guys on the next stream and inside the group. All right. Bye-bye.